welcome to tonight's class. We'll be continuing with Pirkei Avos, and the theme of the Mishnah we'll be discussing tonight is what is Judaism's position about rejoicing at someone else's misfortune. So we'll take a look at what seems like an interesting Mishnah, the author of the Mishnah, the one that said it, where it comes from, and what we can learn from it, the lessons that we can take home from it. So this Mishnah is number 19 in chapter 4, in Pirkei Avos, and here we are in Mishnah number 19. Shmuel the small one would say, when your enemy falls, do not rejoice. When he stumbles, let your heart not be gladdened, lest God see, and it will be displeasing in his eyes, and he will turn his wrath from him to you. So a couple of interesting things in this Mishnah. Number one is the name of the Tana that said this Mishnah, the name of the sage that said this Mishnah is referred to as Shmuel the small one. There's many different titles that people can be given, sometimes after their parents' names, or after the type of work they did, the city that they came from, a nice quality that they had, a tall one, but usually saying referring to someone as a small, like saying Shmuel the midget, doesn't sound very as a very respectable title for a sage of the Mishnah. Secondly, what did the Mishnah say? What does Shmuel the small one say? He quotes from Proverbs, from Mishlei, who is the one that wrote Mishlei. The words of Mishlei were recorded by Shlomo Melech, by King Solomon. And all the verses in Proverbs were from King Solomon, from Shlomo HaMelech. So here, what is unique and special that Shmuel the small one is quoting from Proverbs? He's not adding anything. He literally is just, in the Mishnah records that Shmuel HaKatan would say, Shmuel the small one would say, this verse from Proverbs. Would seem more appropriate to quote in the name of the one that actually wrote it, the one that is recorded in by King Solomon, quote it from Proverbs, from Mishlei. Here there's no mention in the Mishnah itself of where it comes from, of Proverbs itself, and it just has a quote from Shmuel the small one himself. And thirdly, as we discussed earlier a few classes ago when we began learning Pirkei Avos to begin with, is that Pirkei Avos is the one tractate of the Talmud, of the Mishnah, that discusses not that which is halachically responsible, the halachic requirements of every person, of what we must do, what we are required to do, but rather discusses what's called mili da chasiduso, things of that someone which wants to be a chassid, that wants to live his life beyond the letter of the law, to live in a better way, more than he's required to, should study Pirkei Avos. So these ethics that were being taught in ethics of our fathers of Pirkei Avos are things that we're not necessarily required to, but something more that we can aspire to behaviors that we should aspire to behave as if we want to do more than what we are required. So what exactly is this Mishnah teaching us? Why is Shmuel referred to as Shmuel the small one? Why is it being mentioned in his name? And what can we learn from this in our lives? How we can deepen our connection to Hashem beyond the letter of the law. So in order to analyze this Mishnah, we'll first look at Shmuel himself, who he was, and where he got this name, Shmuel the small one, from. So regarding the name Shmuel the Small, the Jerusalem Talmud explains that he earned this name because he would make himself small. Maktin et atzmo. He would make himself small. He would behave in such a way that was humble. He would put others before himself in a very strong way, even at risk of himself being given a bad name. And he would put himself out to preserve the dignity of others, as we'll see in the following few stories that the Talmud mentions. So the first story is about establishing a leap year, So in order to preface the story, we first need to again mention how the Jewish calendar works. Our calendar is a lunar-based calendar. Of course, the cycle of the moon that it takes to go around each month is 29 and a half days approximately, but we don't have half days to a month. So some months are 29 days, other months are 30 days. Usually we do 1 month 29, 1 month 30 throughout the year. The total number of days that there is in a lunar year, if you take 12 lunar months and add up all the days together, we get approximately 354, which is 11 days less than the 365 days that it takes for the solar cycle annually to come back where it started. So if we are going to base our calendar purely off of 12 months of the moon, every 12 months, we're now going to be going, we would go backwards 11 days. So what if Pesach this year began in April? Next year it could begin at the end of March, and it would go back every year. It would go back 11 days, and eventually we'd be celebrating Pesach in the middle of the winter until it comes back around again. So how do we deal with the holidays all being in the appropriate times of the year, the appropriate seasons? If it's 11 days shorter than the sun, which dictates the seasons. So the solution for that is, in the Jewish calendar, we add in what we call a leap year. A leap year is adding in an extra month of 30 days. So every 2 or 3 years, we add in, instead of being 12 months on the Jewish calendar, it has 13 months. Like this year, we had 2 Adars. We had Adar 1 and Adar Beis, Adar 1 and Adar 2. And by doing so, it balances out that it keeps the holidays all in the appropriate seasons. But that's how it is today once we have an established calendar. And of course, even 1,000 years ago, that based on all the calculations, they already could have predicted, and we would know what day all the holidays would fall out on the secular calendar as well, on the Gregorian calendar, because it's all based on calculations. However, in temple times, and up until the time when the Sanhedrin no longer existed, the calendar was not based purely off of calculations. It was actually based off of the Sanhedrin declaring which years would be a leap year. So they would have to take all the calculations into consideration, and then every single year they would not know if it was a leap year or not until it came closer to the month of Adar, and then they would decide, should we make this year a leap year? Should we add in another Adar and push off Pesach, push off Passover another month, or should Passover be in a few weeks' time? So that was unknown until it was established if it was a leap year or not. Once it was no longer calculated by the Sanhedrin, then it started being calculated purely by calculations. But before that, it was all based off of the Sanhedrin's declaration. So how would it be declared? It would be declared there was a group of sages that would get together and decide whether that year was appropriate to be a leap year or not. So this is the introduction to our story here. Now we can read the story from the Talmud. Rabban Gamliel once summoned 7 sages to rise early and join him in the attic to declare a leap year. So there were 7 of them. Him together with 6 others gathered together. He gave invitations to 6 others to gather with him to discuss whether the next year should be a leap year or not, whether they should add an extra month to the year. But Rabban Gamliel came, and there were 8 present. He walks into the room that they were at the appointed time that they were supposed to meet to deliberate over whether they should add in this extra month, and he sees there's an extra person there that wasn't invited. And Rabban Gamliel announced, "Whoever came up here without permission must descend," he said. "Whoever wasn't invited doesn't belong here. This is exclusive of these leading sages that I invited to come together to deliberate over whether or not we should add in another month and make it into a leap year or not." So he said, whoever wasn't invited should leave. Shmuel the small one, which was amongst those present, rose and said, I am the one who ascended without permission. I came not to declare a leap year, but to study the practical application of the law and observe the process. So Shmuel HaKatan, Shmuel the small one, got up and he says that I'm the guy that came here without permission. I didn't come. You shouldn't think that I came because I wanted to be a part of the conversation and figure out whether or not a leap year we should make this year into a leap year or not. But rather, I want to see how the application of the law works. I want to observe the deliberation process of how you decide the new year I want to study. Rabbi Gamliel responded. So Rabbi Gamliel responded to Shmuel, the small one. He tells him, "Sit, my son, sit. It will be worthy for all leap years to be declared by you." So he tells him, "Sit. You should stay here. For you have such a great person that all leap years should have you involved in deciding whether they should be a part or not." Of course, Shmuel himself was one of the people that was invited, but he rose up and gave a statement that he was the one that was not invited and was just coming to observe in order to protect somebody that came without being invited, which none of the others knew who that was. So that's one story that shows the character traits of Shmuel, the small one, Shmuel HaKatan, putting others before himself. And the Talmud continues and tells us that in reality it was not Shmuel the small one who came uninvited, but someone else, and Shmuel claimed responsibility to avoid embarrassing the other person. Okay. Then we have another this character trait of Shmuel HaKatan, Shmuel the small one, and that type of behavior. It had a ripple effect that when others saw the way that he behaved, they also learned from him and behaved in the same similar manner. Now we have two more stories that were all affected by Shmuel the small one, as we will see. Similarly, Rabbi Yehuda was once teaching, and he smelled garlic. Apparently, Rabbi Yehuda was very sensitive to garlic, and he couldn't stand the smell and wasn't able to think and to teach if he smelled a garlic scent. I assume that his students probably knew that and were careful not to have a garlic smell when they came to his lessons. So Rabbi Yehuda was once teaching. He smelled garlic, and he said, "Whoever had garlic, please leave," he asked, so that he can continue teaching. Rabbi Chia stood up and left. One of the great sages, Rabbi Chia, stood up and left, and then everyone else followed suit out of respect for his dignity. Since Rabbi Chia left, everyone else also left. And his class was disrupted, but the person that came with this garlic smell was not embarrassed. The next morning, Rabbi Yehuda's son, Rabbi Shimon, the son of Rabbi Yehuda, met Rabbi Chia, which was the first person to walk out, and asked, "Was it you who disturbed my father by coming to study after eating garlic? Was it your fault that the lecture got canceled yesterday?" Rabbi Chia replied, "Such a thing should not be done among the people of Israel. I certainly did not do that, but I accepted the blame so as not to embarrass another." So Rabbi Chia said, "For certain, I would not do such a thing, but I accepted it that way. Someone else should not be embarrassed that apparently either didn't realize the extreme sensitivity of Rabbi Yehuda to garlic, or for whatever reason he came after eating garlic." The bottom line is that Rabbi Chia took the blame and walked out, and then everyone else followed him so as not to blame someone else. The Talmud continues and tells us, where did Rabbi Chia learn this practice? Rabbi Chia learned this practice from Rabbi Meir. And if we skip to the bottom of the slide, it says, where did Rabbi Meir learn this practice? He learned it from Shmuel the small one. So Rabbi Chia learned this practice from Rabbi Meir, which Rabbi Meir learned it from Shmuel the small one, all coming back to Shmuel HaKatan, Shmuel the small one himself, that this type of behavior was something which was emulated by others, and even recorded in the Talmud that they were copying the traits, these wonderful positive traits of Shmuel, which because of that is how he got the name Shmuel the small one. What was this third story about Rabbi Meir? That Rabbi Meir put himself out for other people. So let's go back to the middle of this slide. Where did Rabbi Chia learn this practice? From Rabbi Meir. As we learned, a woman once came to the study hall of Rabbi Meir and said, "Rabbi, one of you betrothed me through marital relations." Rabbi Meir rose and wrote her a bill of divorce, and then everyone followed suit. Thus, the one who actually did it also wrote a bill of divorce, deeming the woman permitted to marry once again. What is the background behind this story? So, in a Jewish marriage, when a chas and kala, the bride and groom get married under a chuppah, there are two steps in the marriage process. One step is what we call kiddushin, betrothal, and then the second step is called nisuin, is consecrating the marriage. The first step of kiddushin, the first step of a woman being betrothed to a man, happens in one of three ways. The Mishnah tells us that someone can betroth a woman either by money, by giving her money and saying, "I'm giving you money in order that we should get married, in order that I'm sanctifying you and separating you from all others, that we should be married." That's one step. Today, in practice today, that's the method that we use. It's either money or something of value. Today it's done with a ring. When the groom gives the bride a ring under the chuppah, the groom says, "Hareat mekudeshet li kedat Moshe v'Yisrael," that I am sanctifying you to me according to the halacha, according to the religious tenets of Moshe and the Jewish people, and gives her the ring. That's practically the way it's done. Technically, there are two other methods that it can be done. One is by writing a document saying the same thing, saying that you are Hareat mukadeshet li, that you are sanctified to me, that you are betrothed to me. And a third method is if a single man and single woman were to have intimacy together, and before they were intimate, he tells her that I want this intimacy to be a betrothal to me, then that would be considered the first step of a marriage. That would be the first step of an engagement to marriage. And at that point, from that point on, she would not be allowed to marry another person. She'd be considered already a committed married person. And if she wanted to marry someone else, she would require a bill of divorce, a get, in order to marry another person. So here is this third method is one which is not practiced and already over 1,000 years ago was declared which was not an appropriate way to betroth a woman for marriage, and it's something that's frowned upon and not done. As I mentioned before, practically is done through money or value of money, which is done through a ring, but technically it can be done through one of these other methods. So what happened here is that a woman shows up to Rabbi Meir's study hall and tells him, "Rabbi, one of the people in this room, one of the students here, had intimacy with me, and before they had intimacy with me, they said that this is that they want to marry me. So now she's a problem. That if the person doesn't come and say who it is, either she doesn't know or no, it's not saying who it is, she cannot marry another person unless she gets a bill of divorce from the one that she was intimate with." So Rabbi Meir, the head of the study hall, hears what she says and hears her problem, her issue, and he immediately gets up and he himself takes the blame for this act and writes a bill of divorce. Once he did that, then everyone else in the room saw what he did, and they also wrote a get. Of course, if someone writes a bill of divorce and gives it to somebody that they never had any type of commitment to, it's nothing. It's like giving them a blank piece of paper. A person can write as many bills of divorce and hand them out to as many people as they want in the world, and it's absolutely meaningless and useless. It's like going and handing out blank pieces of paper. So by doing so, if all the people in the room then went and wrote a bill of divorce for that woman, what happened is that all of them were basically nothing, and the one that actually this action actually took place with the evening before, that or whenever it happened, whoever actually did it wrote a bill of divorce, and that would have been halachically acceptable, and now she would be able to go and marry someone else, if not that person. So this was the act that Rabbi Meir took responsibility for. He learned this behavior from Shmuel HaKatan, and then we said Rabbi Chia learned it from Rabbi Meir. So anyways, this is all the background of who this person Shmuel HaKatan was. If we look a little further into this great sage, not only did people perceive him for the actions, the way that he behaved, but even the heavenly court, the divine presence of Hashem as well, also agreed or recognized in a way that the people in this world, the sages in this world, were able to understand as well how great Shmuel HaKatan was, this Shmuel the small one. So the Jerusalem Talmud tells the stories of 2 times when a divine voice was heard regarding Shmuel the small one. So in the Talmud Yerushalmi, the Jerusalem Talmud tells us that it happened once that the sages assembled in the upper story of the house of Gadya in Jericho. So they were in Yericho, in this house, and they were studying there, I guess, when there came a divine echo and told them, "There are 2 among you worthy of the divine presence." So they heard this baskol, this divine voice emanating in the room, saying that there are 2 people among you worthy of the divine presence resting upon them. And one of them is Hillel the elder. So the divine voice only singled out one person, even though he said that there were 2. The rest of the sages in the room then looked at Shmuel the small one. They looked at him as if, thinking that he was the second person the divine voice was referring to. On another occasion, the sages assembled in an upper story in Yavna. This time before they were in Jericho and Yericho, now they were in Yavna, when there came a divine echo and told them, "There are 2 among you worthy of the divine presence resting upon them." And one of them is Shmuel the small one. Again, it only mentioned this divine voice, mentioned one of them, one of the 2 people that it said was worthy of the divine presence, of the Shekhinah resting on them, Ruach HaKodesh resting on them. And this time it specified Shmuel the small one. The rest of the sages in the room then looked at Rabbi Eliezer ben Horkanus, as if he was the other one, and they were happy that their opinion concurred with that of the omnipresent one. And they were happy that the previous voice that they heard, that they assumed that the second one was Shmuel the small one. Actually, this time the voice itself mentioned Shmuel the small one explicitly. So from this story we see how great the greatness that although Shmuel HaKatan put himself out for others, he was extremely humble, taking blame for things that he didn't do, so much so that others also followed in his footsteps doing the same thing, that the divine presence, the Shekhinah, came and announced to the sages that he was worthy of Ruach HaKodesh, of this divine spirit resting on him. So this is a little bit of background of who this stature of Shmuel HaKatan was. Obviously not, he wasn't physically small, but it was talking about his behavior and how he treated others. Any comments or questions so far? Okay.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
At the beginning, you said the rabbi invited 7 sages to join him in deciding when the leap year should be. If there were 7 sages joining the rabbi, there should have been 8 people.
Right.
I don't understand why the rabbi was shocked to see 8 people there when he invited 7 others.
So if the 7 to begin with was including him, then the 8 would have also been including him. If the 7 was excluding him, then the 8 was also excluding him.
That isn't what it said.
Let's go back and see.
It said he invited 7 sages to join him.
Where do we go?
And that's been bothering me from the beginning.
Rabbi Gamliel once summoned 7 sages to rise early and join him in the attic. Rabbi Gamliel came, and there were 8 present. So he invited 7 to join him, and when he came, there was 8. So there was 8 that came.
Yes, and Rabbi Gamliel counted, and he saw there were 8, and he said, one of you was not invited. But he invited 7 with himself. That makes 8.
But
what is the problem?
That's assuming that when he said that he came and there were 8 present, that the 8 was including himself. But when in the wording of...
Okay, when Rabbi Gamliel came, there were 8 present already. Is that what it said?
That's okay. That's what it. My understanding of it is. Okay, glad we cleared that up. Now we can continue.
Okay.
Let's go back to where we were. Okay, so now let's explore a little bit further the quote that the Mishnah quotes in the name of Shmuel the Small One, which is from Proverbs. The commentators ask, what is Shmuel the Small One teaching? He's simply repeating a verse from Proverbs said by King Solomon. And here is the verse again, because we'll explore it a little bit more at length. When your enemy falls, do not rejoice. When he stumbles, let your heart not be gladdened, lest God see, and it will be displeasing in his eyes, and he will turn his wrath from him to you. So the verse is telling us that we should not be rejoicing when our enemy falls, and then it continues and says, perhaps God will see, and it will be displeasing in his eyes that we're rejoicing in the enemy's falling, and the enemy stumbling, and therefore he will turn his anger, his wrath from that person which is falling down, instead to the one which is rejoicing. So from the simple reading of the verse, it seems that if we have an enemy, that the downfall of an enemy, we shouldn't be rejoicing. But if we look at almost every single one of our Jewish holidays, we're celebrating overcoming adversaries, overcoming an enemy. Take a look at Purim today. Till today, we're stamping out Haman's name with groggers, and every time his name is mentioned, we're making noise to make sure his name should be erased, and none of his behavior should ever exist again. And each of our holidays, we're celebrating being saved from the hands of our enemies. Of course, we're celebrating ours being saved, but together with it comes the downfall of our enemies. So what is this verse referring to? Rabbi Avadia of Bar Tanura explains that while the verse indeed appears already in Proverbs, Shmuel the Small One would often caution people about this trait. So first of all, it's being mentioned in the name of Shmuel HaKatan because although King Solomon is the one that said it, Shmuel the Small One would often quote these verses and caution people about this trait. But of course, we still need to understand Ethics of Our Fathers contains teachings about pious conduct, not just what's mandated. What is the pious lesson to be learned from the fact that Shmuel the Small One would often repeat this teaching from Proverbs? Another point that requires clarification is what is the connection between this Mishnah and the subsequent Mishnah, which discusses certain preferences in Torah study, considering that the order in the Mishnah is precise and deliberate. So in addition to clarifying what it is in this Mishnah that we can learn as a pious trait, in addition to that, all the Mishnahs, there's some connection between one and another, and there's an order that it was put in. So why is this Mishnah specifically coming directly prior to the following Mishnah, which talks about specific Torah character traits that a person should have in their study of Torah and who they study Torah from? The following Mishnah, number 20, is that Elisha, the son of Avuya, would say, one who learns Torah in his childhood. What is this comparable to? To ink inscribed on fresh paper. So if he learns in his childhood, it's inscribed on fresh paper holds the ink very well. It lasts a long time. Of course, things that we learn in our youth, we remember much better, much more easily. One who learns Torah in his old age, what is this comparable to? To ink inscribed on previously erased paper. Previously erased paper, if you write it again, the ink doesn't remain there as long, and it rubs out more quickly. Similarly, when we learn Torah as we get older, it's harder to remember things. They don't stick with us as well, and therefore Elisha ben Avuya is mentioning the importance of education, of beginning to study when a person is younger, if they are able to. Rabbi Yossi, the son of Yehuda of Kfar HaBavli, would say, one who learns Torah from youngsters, who is he comparable to? To one who eats unripe grapes and drinks unfermented wine from the press. So someone that is studying from a young person is comparable to eating grapes that aren't ripe and wine that's not fermented, not very good. One who learns Torah from the old, if you learn Torah from an elderly person, who is he comparable to? To one who eats ripened grapes and drinks aged wine. It's much better if you're learning Torah from a more elderly person. Rabbi Meir comes and says, he argues on the opinion of Rabbi Yossi. And Rabbi Meir says, look not at the vessel, but at what it contains. There are new vessels that are filled with old wine, and old vessels that do not contain even new wine. The quote of don't judge a book by its cover goes far back to here. Rabbi Meir says, don't judge the bottle by what it looks like. Just because someone looks like they're physically younger, doesn't mean that their knowledge and wisdom that they contain isn't great. And you can have someone that's older that perhaps even new wine isn't there. You can have someone just because they are physically older doesn't mean that what they're sharing is very meaningful. Of course, if you have both together, someone that is older and utilize their time to learn and have knowledge and has experience together with it, then that would be the most preferable way of learning. The Bartanura comes and elaborates on what it means, fresh paper. We said a person should learn from, if a person learning in their youth is like learning from ink written on fresh paper. He says, which lasts, like the material studied in one's youth, it lasts longer. And studying from a young person, he says, is like unripe grapes. What is the meaning of unripe grapes? Which have not completely ripened, and so set the teeth on edge. So too, the wisdom of the child is not completely ripened, and his words are not accepted and don't sit well with the heart. So it's possible that just like unripe grapes are not very palatable. The same thing too, the wisdom of a child may be very wise, but it's not necessarily as palatable, doesn't always sit as well in the heart. Unfermented wine, in which sediment is mixed in, so too the wisdom of the child has a mixture of doubts in it. The unfermented wine, the sediment didn't settle yet, it's all mixed together. So too, he says that the wisdom of a child may be very wise, but he never knows for sure where to go with it. There's always doubts involved, and the older a person is, the more that they've studied, the more that they learned, the more they can be certain of that which they are learning and teaching. Said Rabbi Meir to Rabbi Yossi, look not at the vessel. Rabbi Meir disagrees with Rabbi Yossi bar Yehuda and said that just like there's a new jug full of old wine, so too there's a child whose reasoning is like the reasoning of the elders, and there are elders whose wisdom is lower than that of children, and therefore don't judge the book by its cover, don't judge by what they look like, judge by listen to what they have to say, and judge by what they're sharing and teaching and learning, and then you'll be able to see what the value of what is being taught is. So this whole Mishnah number 20, is all discussing how a person should learn, their age of learning, young versus old themselves, who they should learn from. and the issues of learning that to look out for when one is learning, to try and learn and make sure learning from a teacher which is sound and the reasons are sound and they're certain of that which is being taught. So this is all methods of teaching how to study Torah. So now we'll be able to go back and look at previous Mishnah, at Mishnah number 19, what Shmuel the Small One says, and what it means in the verse that he's repeating from Proverbs, discussing conflict, saying that we should not rejoice in our downfall of enemies. As we mentioned, our downfall of enemies, we have many holidays celebrating our victory over enemies. So we have the first explanation of this verse. This comes from a commentary of the Machzor Vitri. Machzor Vitri, I believe, was written by one of the students of Rashi, so probably about 850 years ago or so, explains that the verse in Proverbs is discussing conflict related to worldly matters. So the Machzor Vitri explains that what type of rejoicing are we referring to when it says we should not rejoice in the downfall of your adversaries, is speaking about someone with which you've had a conflict. So if someone had they were in business and had others that were in the same business, and there's constant conflict between the competitors. So if a competitor goes down and their business falls apart, we shouldn't rejoice. If someone has any other type of conflict with an acquaintance over monetary things or worldly matters, there's some kind of argument, some type of dispute, and then a person becomes victorious and the other one falls or is convicted, whatever the story is, we should not rejoice over the one that we're arguing with falling down and being victorious. But according to the Machzor Vitri, this is not referring to enemies. Enemies of the Jewish people should certainly, we hope and pray that they'll all stop hating us or all be taken care of by Hashem. We should be protected by Hashem's hand and not need to fight the enemies. We hope and pray that all of our enemies disappear and we be victorious and be able to continue living as proud Jews without having to worry about any enemies. But according to the Machzor Vitri, this is talking about worldly conflict between acquaintances, between competitors in physical matters. Shmuel the Small One is adding that the same applies to Torah conflict. And here is why it comes into Pirkei Avot, the ethics of pious people that Shmuel the Small One is adding. That this same concept applies to Torah conflict. When two Torah scholars debate a matter of halacha and one prevails, the victor should not rejoice in his fellow's defeat. This sentiment is also expressed in the prayer recited by Rabbi Nechunya ben Hakana before studying. May my fellows not stumble in a matter of halacha, and may I rejoice with them. So the concept is that when you have Torah scholars studying, if you ever had the opportunity to see in person or see video of a study hall, students are engaged in Torah study. It's very loud and noisy. Their arguments of what this statement of the Talmud might mean, and you go back and forth at it, very loud, so much so that people get very heated in their discussions over a Talmudic concept, over a halachic concept, over which way to interpret it, and they can go at each other in a tremendous heated argument as to what the ruling, what the definition, what the meaning and explanation of a certain passage means. And at times, of course, when it comes to a matter of halachic decision, at the end of the day, the ruling is according to one. Either it's according to the majority, or it's according to the most sound opinion. Different methods used in order to defining who the halachic opinion that we follow goes according to. But at the end of the day, there's a right choice, a right opinion that we all follow, and then there's the other opinions that we don't follow. So when someone recognizes that the halacha goes according to the law goes according to their opinion, they shouldn't rejoice that they overcame their friend in the argument. As we see this in Rabbi Nechunya ben Hakana's prayer, he used to recite a prayer every day before he entered into the study hall and before he left. And his prayer was that his fellows should not stumble in halachic matters, and he should be able to rejoice with them. He should rejoice with them in them coming to the appropriate conclusions, and they should not stumble. He should not be rejoicing in them stumbling in halachic matters. Here is the prayer that Rabbi Nechunya ben Hakana said. This is in Tract Talmud. The Mishnah tells us that Rabbi Nechunya ben Hakana would recite a brief prayer upon his entrance into the study hall and upon his exit. They said to him, "The study hall is not a dangerous place that would warrant a prayer when entering and exiting. So what room is there for this prayer? Why do you have to have a special prayer every time you walk into the study hall and every time you leave?" He said to them, "Upon my entrance, I pray that no mishap will be caused by me in the study hall. Upon my exit, I give thanks for my portion." So, if someone were to make a mistake, if a university professor makes a mistake in teaching some abstract theory, what's the worst thing that's going to happen is someone may have a misunderstanding of a certain concept, but in practice, nothing bad, nothing terrible is going to happen because of it. If an engineer builds a bridge and it collapses, you'll have much more serious repercussions, and many more people will know about it, and terrible things can happen if, God forbid, someone is on the bridge when it collapses. So when we're dealing with halachic matters and actual practice, then it comes to, depending on what the outcome is are people going to be behaving the appropriate way, or are they going to be behaving the inappropriate way? And he says, every time I come to the study hall, I make a prayer that any Torah that's emanating from here should be completely in line with the way that it was intended to by Hashem. We should come to the appropriate conclusions to make sure that people behave in the way that they should. And upon my leaving, I give thanks for Hashem's blessings that so was the case, that we came to the right conclusions. Any comments or questions before we continue?
Can I go back a little?
Sure.
You mentioned a rabbi whose name was, I forget his name, he's Ben Hyrcanus.
Hyrcanus.
Which is a Greek name. Is that permissible?
Rabbi, where was he?
Before this.
It's before. Hang on. Oh. Eliezer ben Hyrcanus.
Here, Elliot, yes.
Yes.
What kind of that's a Greek name. It's when Hellenism was active in Judaism.
Right.
I have not seen that before.
Yeah, Hyrcanus is actually a name which is mentioned, I believe, mentioned more than once in Mishnah and Talmud. I do not know where the origin of it or how it became to be a name of sages or the fathers of sages, but that's a good question. I have to.
Wasn't he one of the many kings of Israel?
So there were many people. I'm assuming there were many people with the same name. But like I said, I don't have a good answer for you today.
I have another question.
Go ahead.
The term of erasing from paper.
Yes.
I didn't know you could, in those days, how the use of paper was, I think, non-existent.
Well, not paper, even with parchment. If you have a brand...
It said paper. It says...
Right, that was a translation. Yes, that was...
Erasing from paper.
Yes,
that kind of threw me a little bit.
Yes.
It's like riding camels before camels were domesticated.
We'll have to file a complaint with the translator of this version, but certainly it's not the paper that we use today.
And if the defeated party in a halachic debate, it said he would celebrate with them. How did they celebrate the defeat of a halachic concept?
How would one celebrate?
How would they celebrate? How would they celebrate? How would the yeshiva bochers or participants, how would they celebrate?
One could celebrate. There's different parts of celebrating. There's celebrating the outcome of the rightful opinion, and then they're celebrating that I'm right and the other yeshiva bochers, the other yeshiva students are wrong, and either degrading them or just celebrating the fact that they're wrong. How would they celebrate? I don't know. Maybe they say a l'chaim with a little.
That would be my concept. My imaginary concept would be pulling out a bottle of whatever. I won't say Slivovitz. And drinking a l'chaim.
A l'chaim and some herring. Who knows? Okay. Where were we? So coming back to where we were discussing the idea that, hang on. All right, he would come to the study hall, and before he would give his prayer that no mishaps should be caused by him. Upon his exit, he would thank Hashem for his portion, that hopefully nothing goes wrong. The Talmud elaborates a little further on his prayer and say that the sages taught in a Braita the complete formula of Rabbi Nechunya ben Hakana's prayer. Upon his entrance, what did he say? This is what he would say. He would say, "May it be your will, Lord my God, that no mishap in determining the law be caused by me, and that I not fail in any matter of law." And then he said, "And that my colleagues who together with me engage in clarifying the law will rejoice with me." He specified, "And that I will neither declare pure that which is impure, nor declare impure that which is pure, and that my colleagues will not fail in any matter of law, and that I will rejoice with them." So as part of his prayer, that his colleagues as well should not fail, and that he should be able to rejoice with them in the appropriate outcome. Okay, so Shmuel the Small is now discussing which type of enemy, so to speak, is he talking about? He's talking about a quote-unquote enemy in Torah warfare, in their debates with each other. When one scholar has a certain opinion and a second scholar disagrees, we are not talking about a person who says something just because he wants to take the opposite position to his fellow. So it's not just trying to give opposite opinions just to add to the conversation, try to look for something that's the opposite. The Torah discusses normative people, not silly fringe characters that are just looking to find other reasonings. The second person is disagreeing because this is his genuine conclusion after toiling over this Torah concept. So when you have two people are discussing, they're both stating their opinion after they work hard at trying to understand it, and they perhaps each came to different opinions, different conclusions, and now they're completely having this heated debate and discussion over which one is the appropriate opinion. Of course, each one believes 100% that their opinion is the correct one, and the other one, their friend, is understanding it wrong. Since this is a conclusion reached as a result of sincere investment in Torah study, when he sees that his fellow is saying the opposite, he considers him to be distorting the meaning of the Torah, and he can't tolerate it. The other person becomes his enemy in Torah warfare. He can't handle someone else's opinion that he came to a different conclusion that he doesn't think is appropriate. Like we see in Tehillim in Psalms number 127, tells us a verse, "Like arrows in the hand of a mighty man, so are the sons of one's youth. Praiseworthy is the man who has filled his quiver with them. They will not be ashamed when they talk to the enemies of the gate." Rashi explains to us, what does this mean, the arrows in the hand of a mighty? He tells us the arrows are arrows for fighting his enemies. What are sons of one's youth? This is the students of one's youth. And praiseworthy is the man who has filled his quiver with them, is with these arrows. So it's praiseworthy to have many students, and those students should have, so to speak, arrows in their hands for fighting the enemies within Torah study. As the Talmud elaborates further on this verse, what is the meaning of the phrase enemies in the gate? They have arrows to fight these enemies. With regard to Torah study, what does it mean, enemies in the gate? Rabbi Chia bar Abba says, even a father and his son, or a rabbi and his student, who are engaged in Torah study in one gate, can become enemies with each other due to the intensity of their studies. But they do not leave there until they love each other, as it is stated in the verse discussing the places the Jewish people engaged in battle in the wilderness. The verse tells us, therefore it is said in the book of the wars of the Lord, Vahev in Sufa, Besufa, and the valleys of Arnon. Now the Hebrew word Vahev is interpreted and is related to the word for love, Ahava. So Ahava and Vahev are similar letters. The Hey Vav, the Hey and Vet and Vez at the end. So it says that they were these wars, the wars of Hashem, are in Vahev and Sufa. So Vahev is related to the word love. And then if we look at the word Sufa, we could also read it a little bit differently. Instead of Sufa, it could be Besofa, with a cholam. Additionally, do not read this as in Sufa, rather read it as at its end, meaning at the conclusion of the dispute, they are beloved to each other. So as much as it possibly during a dispute, there can be a very heated argument and conversation, and each one completely does not agree with the other's opinion, but at the end, they love each other completely, 100%. That is the method of having, so to speak, adversaries or controversy within study, but being the best of friends. You had in the Talmudic times, you had those that are constantly arguing with each other, constantly mentioned in having difference of opinions, but together with constantly having different opinions, they were also the best of friends and the best of colleagues with each other and appreciated each other's opinion. So at the time of discussion, that may be very heated, but at the end of the day, you end leaving feeling even closer to each other and even more beloved by each other. This is the method that it should be done. And here is where we come to, where do we go to? So this is where we have what Shmuel the small one is trying to teach us. Here it is. Regarding such situations, the Mishnah teaches that when your enemy falls, do not rejoice. When the law is decided in accordance with your opinion, you should rejoice that the truth has come to light. There's no greater joy than resolving doubts. If you are not happy, this means the whole matter isn't important to you. So of course we should rejoice in coming to the final conclusion. But when you're coming to the final conclusion, there's a conclusion that's right and there's a conclusion that's not right. And perhaps the conclusion that's not right was the guy they were just sitting and arguing with for an hour or for a few days over a specific topic, and the conclusion is not like him. A person may be very excited that the halachic ruling is like him and not like their friend. But the Mishnah cautions, this is what Shmuel, the small one, is cautioning us, that when your enemy falls, do not rejoice. Meaning, your joy should not be over the failure of your enemy, but over the emergence of the true law and the dismissal of the incorrect opinion. Meaning, we should not be rejoicing over the fact that someone else perhaps was not correct. This is a nuance within the joy, is that we should be rejoicing over the fact that the true halacha, the true law emerged. Whether it was me that came up with the opinion which was decided to be the law, whether it was my friend, whether it was someone else, it's irrelevant of who came up with it. What's relevant is that we came to the right conclusion. So what's relevant is that the bridge should be built the appropriate way, that nobody should Nobody should hurt themselves. Nobody should violate something according to what Hashem wants us to do. We should come to the right opinion, the right conclusions. But if the joy is due to your enemy falls, we need to examine if there is any joy at all from the clarification of the law, or if everything is coming just from the feeling of personal victory. If someone is rejoicing that they're right and their friend is wrong, they're rejoicing over the other opinion that is not according to them, then the whole entire joy needs to be re-examined. Are we rejoicing because we came to the true halacha, the true conclusion, or rejoicing because it's just because we're excited that our opinion was accepted and someone else's opinion wasn't? And if we're just rejoicing because someone else's opinion wasn't correct, who knows? Perhaps, who knows what the reason is why that person came to the incorrect conclusion? There are many different reasons why a person may come to an incorrect conclusion. One of which could be that the person came to an incorrect conclusion because for some reason Hashem decided to not bless their studies, and they came to an incorrect conclusion. We know that when we study Torah, number one, we need to put as much effort as we can into coming to the right conclusions. And secondly, we need the blessing of Hashem that we should actually make the right decisions and understand it appropriately. So if we rejoice over someone else's failures of understanding appropriately, perhaps then, if the reason that they didn't understand appropriately was because of Hashem not blessing their studies, perhaps that lack of blessing in studies will then turn from that person and come to us. And this is what he continues in the Mishnah, continues and says, lest Hashem see, and it'll be displeasing in his eyes, and he will turn his wrath from him to you. It may well be that the other scholar has a good head, and the reason he did not reach the correct conclusion is a result of Hashem's wrath, or for some reason he was punished by Hashem, by God, that he should not merit to reach the correct halacha conclusion. This is why we are told not to rejoice in his downfall. On the contrary, we should feel sorry for him that he did not reach the right conclusion. There's many different reasons why he may have not reached the right conclusion. Maybe he didn't sleep enough, maybe he didn't eat enough, maybe his head wasn't working right that day, but perhaps it was because the blessing of Hashem wasn't in his studies that day. And if that's the reason, we certainly should feel sorry for that person and not rejoice in them not coming to the appropriate conclusion. And with this, we can also understand the following Mishnah, which talked about how a person should study. Here we have here Shmuel the small one is telling us, Shmuel HaKatan is telling us that we should not rejoice in our friend's downfall in study, and perhaps the blessing of Hashem was not in that person's study, and if we do rejoice in the conclusion not being like them, perhaps it will be turned to us. The next Mishnah gives us some examples of a case when a person may have not started off on the right foot, and his studies may not be in the best possible way. So he gives us ideas and opinions of how we should study, and shares with us that there may be a person that for whatever reason, perhaps the person wasn't able to study when they were younger and only started studying when they were 40, 50 or older. Like Rabbi Akiva himself. Rabbi Akiva only started studying when he was 40 years old. Studying at an older age is a disadvantage, and there's many other reasons that a person may have a disadvantage in their study. But this is how the first Mishnah connects with the second one. The first one is already speaking not just about an enemy, not even about an adversary, not even about, as the Machzor Vitri explained on a more simple level, that is speaking about a competitor, or someone that we had a physical, a materialistic argument with, a monetary argument or something of that sort. But on a deeper level, it's referring to arguments in study that we should not rejoice at the being right over another person being wrong in their halachic discussions. And from that runs into the following Mishnah, continuing teaching about how a person should study. Of course, one of the lessons that we can learn from all of this is that when we study, we need to, number one, do our best to understand correctly. Number two, we need the blessing of Hashem to understand in the best appropriate way. And most importantly is that we should not rejoice in the downfall of others in Torah study, in other opinions, in other conversations. There's many different discussions one can have, but as long as we're still all loving each other at the end of the conversations, that's the bottom line. So we hope and pray that we'll all continue studying and understanding the best possible way, and even if there are disputes and arguments will stay continuing to love each other, unify Jewish people until the coming of Mashiach.